Week 4062 of lockdown, and the hair just keeps getting longer. This week I overheard somebody in my community beating themselves up, getting really quite deeply aggravated and upset with themselves for things they felt that they hadn't done or hadn't achieved in their life in recent times. And it got me thinking, do you know what? We're not as good to ourselves as we need to be. So this week's episode is all about how to be good to yourself. Let's get started. Hi, this is Simon Phillips, and we're here to share insights, ideas and inspiration, and to have a conversation. So give me your comments below. Let me know your thoughts on what I'm talking about today, how it may have helped you think about something a bit differently, or maybe challenged you. Maybe you've got a different opinion altogether. I'd love to hear from you. So put your comments below and I will be engaging with you personally. So this week's episode is all about being good to yourself. And I want to tackle this initially from two angles. The first is based on a quote that I saw this morning, which is, do just enough, but not as much as you can. And the second aspect of this is a quote from a song by Journey called Be Good to Yourself, which is, forgive is to forget. But let's back up and have a look at that quote. So back to that first one where we're doing just enough, just what's needed, but not as much as we possibly can. Those of you who've been around this channel for a while will know that I often talk about Pareto's law, which is basically saying you can get 80% of what you need done in 20% of the time allotted to it. Equally, you can achieve great results with your initial effort, and then when you apply a load of extra effort to make it perfect, you literally are potentially inverting that equation, and you're applying 80% of your effort to get just that final 20% of the results. So really effective time managers, people who are good at controlling their time and being good to themselves, actually get a good enough result with 80%, and then they get 80% of the result that they're after with just 20% of their effort, and as a result they've got a lot more time available to mix things up, being good to themselves, maybe getting on with the next task. But the key here is you don't have to be perfect to get a good result. What you need to do is get more good results, because over time that creates a body of work that will ensure that you get the results that you're personally looking for, and the people around you will benefit too. The second aspect of this I want to consider as well is, for those of you who know a lot about physical training and building your body and your muscles and your cardiovascular system, you'll know that actually training full out can often have a negative effect on your body. There are times when you are going to give it as much as you possibly can, but in general, to improve fitness, to improve health, we're giving it as much as we need to do without necessarily overdoing it and risk tearing muscles or breaking things down inside the body. So in essence, what I'm suggesting that you think about more is reserving your all for literally life and death situations. Give it a good shot. I can guarantee you, if you're willing to go that first 80% of the way and give it a good attempt without necessarily wearing yourself out completely, you will still be doing more than a lot of people around you. Some people around you will lose hope after the first 20%, and there'll be other people around you who'll get bored, or maybe they'll get a little bit of negative feedback and feel challenged by that. If you can keep some mental toughness around this, you will keep going and achieve better results, but you don't have to kill yourself. Now, there are times when you've been training for something, you've been working at something for quite some time, and you know that there's that extra bit of effort that's required to tip it over the line, to get the result that you're looking for. On those occasions, that's when you can reserve your all, because on those occasions, what you're actually able to do is give it your all in the knowledge that the next day you're going to take a break. So if you know you've got a bit of a break coming up and you've got an opportunity to put some extra effort in to get something finished, of course that makes sense. But don't do that on a routine basis. You've got to look after yourself. So let's turn our attention to this second notion of to forgive is to forget. A good friend of mine, a guy called Chris Lubber, grew up in apartheid-based South Africa. And he told me the story once he was incarcerated and one of the guards at that prison treated him pretty harshly. A few years later, Chris met up with that guard again. They were actually employed to do a similar job. They were both in and around the circles of Nelson Mandela to provide security for him during the Rugby World Cup in 1997. Chris was incensed. He didn't want to work with this guy who had treated him so badly in the past. And he went straight to Nelson Mandela and said, "I'm not going to do this." Interestingly, Nelson Mandela's perspective was different. And with Nelson Mandela's encouragement, Chris went back, did a professional job, and started to tune in to this human being to try to understand him better. A few years later, that same guard who treated Chris so harshly is now the godfather to his son. So there's something in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was set up in South Africa at Nelson Mandela's behest, which was basically saying, let's really understand what went on. Let's forgive the people. Let's hear the people that transgressed and did all of these bad things in our society. Let's understand what went on so that we can decide for ourselves what we will and what we won't forgive. What Nelson Mandela knew was that forgiveness was not something that you're doing for the other person. It's something that has a much, much bigger impact on you. Because if you can forgive someone and effectively put it behind you, whether or not you forget it completely, by putting it behind you and consciously deciding that's my past, you're freeing up your mind, you're freeing up your spirit and your heart to fully engage in life today. And you're releasing all that bitterness that can really restrict your own growth and your own happiness. What this all boils down to is actually just being easier on yourself. You've heard people say, and I've no doubt about this, you've heard people say, I'm my own worst critic. I'm my own worst enemy. And it's this bit that we're trying to eat into with this idea, this thought process of being good to ourselves. Those of you with partners that you've been sharing the lockdown with, you'll know that there have been times when there's been elements of tension and maybe there's been aspects of your conversations and that have been a bit critical. Sometimes we can often be the most critical of the people who love us most. And actually, the opportunity here is to switch off the judgment switch, to decide once and for all, I'm not going to be so judgmental because guess what? I'm not perfect. But I'm also not going to beat myself up because guess what? I'm actually doing a fairly good job. And we're going to come back to that in a minute. So the people we tend to be most critical of are our partners, the people we love most, people in our families, the people who are actually there on a day-to-day basis and that we engage with. And we have this judgmental gene almost that is raised in a school environment where we're asked to be critical and to assess and to understand and to judge information. But in terms of human dialogue and engagement with each other, it's quite an unhelpful approach. So if we can switch that judgment notion off, then we're in a much better place to build good relationships and to ease the pressure on ourselves, because the number one person that we're usually critical of is ourselves. We beat ourselves up. We think that we're not good enough. We look back at what we've maybe achieved or not achieved over a week, and we start to think, I'm just being lazy, I'm not getting on with things. We judge ourselves and our outputs and our achievements, and we think that actually because they're not quite the same or as good as somebody else over here, that's some sort of assessment of ourselves. But the reality is we don't know what's going on for those people over there. We don't know how long they've been trying to do what they are doing right now. We don't know all the challenges they've had along the way. All we can know is what effort we're putting in, what our own personal circumstances are, and what are some of the challenges that we have on our plate. Because whether or not they're as big or as small as anybody else's challenges, they're still our challenges. They're still things that get in the way of the way that we think and the way that we behave. So I've got 3 ideas for you this week that will help you rebuild your sense of personal value and help you switch off that judgment switch. And the first one of these is to capture a list of all the positive things that you're achieving right now. Some people call this a gratitude list. Some people are just keeping a score. Some people love to have a to-do list and tick everything off at the end of the day. This is a mental list of the things that you're positively doing, the people that you're positively impacting in life, the people that you support, the people that you do the very mundane things for. All of that wouldn't happen without you. And I'd like you to create that list and keep going. Even when you think you've got a good list, keep going, keep going. And every time you find yourself being harsh on yourself or judging yourself too severely, I want you to go back to that list and remind yourself, I'm not doing a bad job really. And the second thing I want you to do to look after yourself and be good to yourself is to capture when you believe you've done enough. When you've done the majority of the work that needs to be done in a certain time frame, and you know that actually if you ask yourself, you could literally come back to it the next day and finish it off if you need to, if you don't quite feel it's there. But you don't have to keep going. It's in those extra 20% that we talked about where things get really meaty in terms of challenges, and some of the really difficult things to work through become exposed, because it's always devil's in the detail, as they say. But you can move things forward quite a long way with just that initial piece of work. So I want you to stop, physically stop, and mentally think, that's enough for now. In doing that, you're going to create some space for yourself. You're going to create some opportunities for you to feel like you've got time for some of those extra things in life that you love to do. And the final thing I'd like you to consider before we finish today is go back to the concept of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Even some of the people who've done the most horrendous things to each other, that whole commission was set up to enable people to forgive themselves and to forgive others. Recognize that we are all imperfect. Recognize that we're never going to get everything done. There will always be things that we could have done better. There will always be things that we could have done more of in life. But we're all getting along. We're all doing our best with the resources that we have available to us. Yes, there's always room for improvement. How fantastic is that? So forgive yourself if you haven't quite achieved everything that you thought you would in a certain time frame. If you haven't maybe called all your friends that you thought you would do this month. If you haven't spent all the time that you want with your loved one because there have been other things that have just got in the way. Whatever it is, it really doesn't matter. I want you to forgive yourself, because in forgiving yourself, you will then find it so much easier to forgive others too. And in forgiving others, remember That's helping you. That's retaining your energy. It's letting go of bitterness, and it's letting go of that resentment and energy sapping angst that you may have when you're in a judgmental mode. So switch it off. Give yourself some space. Forgive yourself. Make a long list of all those great things that you've done. And I can guarantee you'll feel a lot better. And you'll also feel energized to get on with some of those projects that you've been putting off for a while. I hope that's been helpful. Click the like button, subscribe, come back next week. Let's talk some more, leave some comments. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I will look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a good one.